Our first topic in this course is symbolic action and the power of ritual. By the power of ritual, I'm referring to the way in which ritual is not simply a fun activity. Rather, ritual also has social and psychological effects. It is powerful. It can impact people's ideas about themselves and their relationships with others. In other words, it can be transformative. To explore these ideas, our reading and the film will take us to Korea, Southern Africa, and the island of Bali in the country of Indonesia. All right, let's start with some basic terms. Rituals are replete with symbols. So, what are symbols? Symbols are a subset of signs. Signs, simply, are things that stand for other things. The meanings of signs, though, are not transparent. Not everyone reads signs in the same way. Humans learn the meaning or meanings of particular signs by virtue of participating in a culture. Among the different types of signs that exist, symbols are signs that have an arbitrary relationship to the thing they represent. In other words, the meaning of a symbol is established by the social group. Different symbolic systems will represent the same thing using different symbols. In the example given in this image, we can see that there are different types of signs that we can use to represent water. And the symbol that is used to represent water in the English language is the word water. You can see that in the bottom right-hand corner. Water. It's a funny sound, isn't it? Different languages and cultures will use different symbols to represent water. For example, agua in Spanish, or Wasser in German. There is no necessary relationship between the thing water and the symbolic word for it, water. As with all symbols, to learn the meaning of the symbol, you need to learn it from cultural insiders. Also, many actions have symbolic meaning, such that the meaning of those actions makes sense within a particular cultural context. We can call these symbolic actions. Examples of symbolic actions are making a peace sign, thrusting a fist into the air, placing flowers on a grave, and applying holy water. The meanings of these actions make sense within a specific cultural symbolic system. Victor Turner, whose name you will come across more than once in this course, launched a line of investigation known as Symbolic Anthropology. Symbolic Anthropology interprets rituals by identifying the symbols and the symbolic actions within rituals and decoding their meanings according to the perspective of a cultural insider. Your first assignment for this segment of the course is to read Tom Driver's chapter on Transformation, the Magic of Ritual. He makes an argument about the power of ritual, and he gives examples from different countries around the world. But I would like you to pay close attention to the examples he gives from South Korea and Lesotho. Lesotho is a tiny country embedded within South Africa. Two sentences in Driver's chapter seem to really capture the essence of his argument. First, on page 175, he says, quote, "The business of religions and their rituals, then, is to effect transformations, not only of persons' individual subjectivities, but also transformations of society and the natural world." Then, as he says on page 184, quote, "Ritual is neither a detached contemplation of the world nor a passive symbolization of it, but is the performance of an act in which people confront one kind of power with another and rehearse their own future." We might summarize these sentences by saying that rituals actually transform the way that people think about themselves, society, and the natural world, and they do so because they oblige people to perform symbolic actions that directly represent the idealized self an idealized social world. The rituals rehearse the kind of social relationships that are ideally envisioned. So, as you are reading, aim to understand those two sentences and how Driver illustrates those ideas with examples from specific rituals. Don't be misled by the use of the term magic in Driver's chapter. At times, he is speaking about magic in the traditional sense of how people will try to harness spiritual forces through spells in order to achieve certain practical aims. At other times, though, he is talking about the magic of ritual in a metaphorical sense, in the way that ritual often transforms participants' views of themselves and others and their attitudes, even in ways that the participants may not intend or realize. In other words, the transformation may happen without the conscious awareness of the ritual participants. Then, later in the week, also on the same topic of symbolic action and the power of ritual, we will consider what may be called a world renewal ritual. World renewal rituals are found in many different cultures, and these rituals are intended to extirpate or root out what is considered undesirable and to usher in the good and the peaceful. You will watch a film called The 11 Powers. This film documents a world-renewing ritual on the island of Bali in the country of Indonesia. In this ritual, you will see things that many Americans might find shocking or just bizarre. In fact, ritual in all cultures often involves practices that would be considered bizarre, taboo, or prohibited outside of the ritual context, even within the same culture. This points to the fact that ritual is a place apart. In other words, a ritual is a sacred space in which practices that transgress or violate everyday norms may be allowed and even considered necessary to bring about the desired effects. In anthropology, we consider it important for outsiders to a culture to set aside temporarily their own cultural beliefs and values and try to understand the logic of the ritual practices from the perspective of the participants, or from an insider's perspective. So, in watching this film, take on the role of a cultural detective. Ask yourself, what are the cultural meanings of the different ritual actions you are witnessing? Let me give you a little background on Balinese religion. Bali has a rich and varied history, and its predominant religion is best understood as a syncretic mixture of Hinduism, Buddhism, and the more ancient animism. Animism involves a belief in souls, or a pervasive spirit that inheres in a body but is separable from it and lives on even after the death of the body. Animism can involve belief in souls of humans or animals. Often in animistic thought, the soul of the deceased is thought to remain on the earthly plane as a spirit. The Balinese use two calendars: the solar calendar, based on the 365-day revolution of the Earth around the Sun, and the lunar calendar, based on the movement of the Moon around the Earth. Many Balinese rituals are timed according to the lunar calendar, and this is the case for the Eka Dasa Rudra, which is the ritual depicted in this film. As a world renewal ritual, the Eka Dasa Rudra is intended to refresh and renew the world, to banish evil and usher in peace and tranquility. It is a ritual that is performed at the end of the lunar century, which is slightly less than 100 solar years. This film captures the last time the ritual was ever performed, which was in 1979. Fans of classic movies may recognize the voice of the narrator, actor Orson Welles. Be warned, This film shows animal sacrifice. There is not much bloodshed, but you do see many animals being led to their deaths. This may be disturbing for you, but please try to set aside some of your emotional reactions and instead approach the film anthropologically, seeking to understand the cultural beliefs and values that are behind people's actions. You will see people performing many symbolic actions: collecting and pouring waters considered to be sacred, marching for long distances across the island, enjoining gods to enter statues that represent them, offering sacrificial animals to gods, moving in specific ways a prescribed number of times, preparing communal feasts from the meat of the animals sacrificed, eating food that has been thus blessed, and resting. Try and discern the meanings of these different symbolic actions and how these different actions are coordinated to work together toward the goal of world renewal. As you're watching, think about the following. First, what seem to be some of the symbolic actions in the Ekadasa Rudra that are most clearly related to the goal of world renewal? Then, think back to the 2 sentences I highlighted from Tom Driver's chapter on transformation, the magic of ritual, and consider whether the film provides any good examples of what he is talking about. Again, the 2 sentences that I highlighted were, from page 175, quote, "The business of religions and their rituals, then, is to effect transformations, not only of persons' individual subjectivities, but also transformations of society and the natural world." And from page 184, quote, "Ritual is neither a detached contemplation of the world nor a passive symbolization of it, but is the performance of an act in which people confront one kind of power with another and rehearse their own future." As you are watching the film, be sure to have the closed captioning turned on. Click the CC button at the bottom right-hand corner of the video. I recommend that everyone watch all of the films with captions on, because even if you hear well, the captions aid in your understanding. Take notes while watching all of our films, because taking notes helps you focus your attention and remember important information afterwards.